Making Doctor Who is very, very difficult. Just think of all the aliens, the planets, and the corridors that need to be designed every single week. So you can't really blame the crew for cutting the odd corner, can you? I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with 10 times Doctor Who reused footage and hoped you wouldn't notice. Number 10. Tardis in Sheffield. Series 11 and 12 of Revived Who were both based in Sheffield, but the show actually only filmed there twice. The Woman Who Fell to Earth was Doctor Who's most extensive Sheffield shoot, with scenes captured at the city's iconic HTC crane site and Norton Water Tower. More central locations included Sheffield Interchange and exteriors for Graham's house. For Arachnids in the UK, the team returned to Graham's house and also shot at Yaz's home at the Park Hill estate. One of the story's defining images is of the Tardis materializing outside this location, and in fact it was so memorable that they reused it twice in Series 12, so stories could be set in Sheffield without having to return. The shot first appeared at the start of Can You Hear Me, with the TARDIS once again materializing. Then at the end of Revolution of the Daleks, the shot turns up again. It's a slightly wider angle, there's added lens flare, and the TARDIS is static this time, but it's undoubtedly from the same shoot. Now you can hardly blame the crew for not wanting to lug the TARDIS all the way up to the Steel City for a single shot. And as it stands, this is a nice little Easter egg that ensures that these Sheffield set stories feature at least some footage captured there. Number 9. Multiplied Maldivarium, or Maldivarium? I've debated all day how to say this word, so whatever you want to call it. The rip-roaring opening to the Pandorica Opens contains callbacks to many of the Doctor's recent adventures, with cameos from Vincent van Gogh, Winston Churchill, Professor Bracewell, Liz 10, and of course, River Song, the best character. Now we also meet a new character who will go on to become a fan favourite, the blue-skinned black marketeer, Dorian Maldivar. Now we first meet Dorian in his base of operations, the Maldivarium, potato. Basically it's Doctor Who's answer to the Star Wars cantina. Now, despite appearing very briefly, this location makes a huge impact, in no small part due to the swanky establishing shot that introduces it. So, when Dorian and the Maldivarium returned in the following series in A Good Man Goes to War, this time for a rendezvous with Madame Kovarian, it made perfect sense to press that shot back into service. And that's exactly what they did, reusing the asset, albeit in a modified form. The colour grading was tweaked and the passing spaceship and exterior lights were removed to indicate that the venue was shutting down, but it was the same shot. And then the Maldivarium would make one more on-screen appearance in Series 9's The Magician's Apprentice. Once again, the shot was recycled, this time with a much murkier colour grade. Not a bad innings for a shot and a location conceived for a one-off appearance. Number 8. Not So New Earth. In Gridlock, the Doctor takes Martha to New Earth, a planet he visited with Rose in the Series 2 story of the same name. Now, upon realising this, Martha is understandably a little narked. Viewers could also be mistaken for feeling a sense of déjà vu, because although this story was set in the Undercity of New York as opposed to the city itself, not everything we saw on New Earth was, new. Upon arriving in the planet's slums, the Doctor and Martha find an info point showing the latest traffic report from Sally Calypso. The report proceeds to show footage from above ground, and if that footage seems familiar, well, that's because it was ripped directly from New Earth. These are some of the very first shots we saw in that episode, such as this establishing shot where you can clearly see the TARDIS perched on the cliff in the background. On this occasion, though, the footage is treated with a green tinge and some good old-fashioned grain. Perhaps the team were counting on fans noticing this one, as it's a nice bit of continuity in its own right. But anyone who hadn't already watched New Earth 5 billion times would be none the wiser. Number 7. The £8,000 model shot. Now, it's not just the new series that's guilty of shot reuse. In 1985, Doctor Who was put on an 18-month hiatus, and when the show eventually returned to our screens, producer John Nathan Turner was keen that it should do so with a bang. To that end, he decided to open season-long epic The Trial of a Time Lord with Doctor Who's most expensive sequence to date, an establishing shot of the space station on which the trial takes place. It lasts for 40 seconds and cost a colossal £8,000 to create, making it the most expensive shot in classic Who, but also one of the most impressive. John Nathan Turner made sure he got his money's worth by reusing the shot multiple times in subsequent episodes. So if you thought you'd seen those exact same space station angles more than once, your eyes weren't deceiving you. Notable examples include the start of Mind Warp, the climax of Mind Warp, and the start of The Ultimate Foe. It is rather fitting, though, that a story all about manipulated events should itself attempt to hoodwink the viewer. Number 6. TARDIS in flight. We've seen the TARDIS in space countless times over the years, but with CGI budgets as tight as they are, it's not always possible to commission a new shot, and the team sometimes opt to reuse an old one. One lesser-known example can be found in the first RTD era. Early on in The Stolen Earth, when the Doctor takes Donna to the Shadow Proclamation, we see a shot of the TARDIS in flight, a shot which originally appeared in The Parting of the Ways when the TARDIS was attacked by Dalek missiles. Much more notorious are the sequences of the TARDIS entering and exiting House's bubble universe in The Doctor's Wife, which reappeared countless times in Moffat-era trailers. It even turned up again in Series 10's The Pilot. In both cases, though, the shots are generic enough to be repurposed without anyone really batting an eyelid. And as mentioned, CGI renders are expensive, so we'll forgive the team for reusing the odd one here and there. Number 5. K9 cost cutting. So the other entries on this list cover reuse shots within Doctor Who only, but this entry concerns a shot that was originally created for a spin-off. The climax of Journey's End saw all of the 10th Doctor's companions band together to help tow the Earth back home, including K9. Now, K9 had made a triumphant return to Doctor Who alongside Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion, and both also appeared in spin-off The Sarah Jane Adventures, though rights complications limited K9's involvement, hence why he spent a bunch of time consigned to a black hole. Now, K9 would eventually escape his spacey purgatory in The Madwoman in the Attic, but as of Journey's End, he was still at the black hole, with the script requiring a shot of him materializing in Sarah Jane's attic for a brief cameo. Fortunately, one such shot already existed from the Sarah Jane Adventures story The Lost Boy, where K9 had made a rare in-person appearance. Now, as we've established, CGI shots are expensive, so why make a new one when existing footage will do just as well? Now, to be fair, this is a particularly clever bit of shot reuse, not least because only a small portion of the audience who had watched both shows would have actually seen it before. Number 4. Duplicated Daleks. At first, the Daleks were conspicuously absent from Flux. After all, if there's a universe-ending catastrophe to capitalise upon, you'd have thought that they'd be first in line. Instead, the Sontarans were the focus of Flux's first 2 chapters. Hardly surprising when you consider that the Chibnall era largely reserved the Daleks for specials, a refreshing change in its own right. Still, those bumpy boys did eventually find their way into Flux, with brief appearances in Once Upon Time and The Vanquishers. However, neither of these cameos necessitated new footage. The Daleks in Once Upon Time were entirely computer-generated, and in The Vanquishers, they were represented via reused footage, an alternate take of the Death Squad as seen in that year's New Year's Day special, Revolution of the Daleks. It is a slightly puzzling one, though, as the 2022 specials, 2 of which feature the Daleks, had gone before cameras by the time The Vanquishers was broadcast, so it's not like the crew was averse to shooting new Dalek material. Perhaps they wanted footage of the villains in their admittedly rather nifty new spaceship. And for the sake of a couple of shots, recycling footage made more sense than rebuilding an entire set. Number 3. The Lifted Lift. The lift shot is one of Doctor Who's most infamous reused shots. Once you've seen it, you'll never unsee it. Appropriately enough, it all started with the first episode of the revived series. For the sequence where Rose takes that fateful trip down to Henrik's basement, the team needed a shot of a descending lift. Ever resourceful, the BBC decided to shoot in one of its own buildings, with the lift in question being an actual BBC lift. The shot was captured on the 11th of September 2004. At the time, nobody could have predicted how prolific it would become. Whenever Doctor Who needed a shot of a lift in future, they simply reused the footage they'd captured for Rose, sometimes the original version going down, sometimes reverse going up. If a story has a lift in it, chances are this shot is in there too. It first reappeared a few stories later in World War III, this time posing as a lift in Downing Street. I don't know why I find it weird to think that there's a lift in Downing Street. I think because from the outside it's just a house, and houses don't have lifts, but it probably does have a lift. Has anyone been inside Downing Street? Are there lifts inside? Anyway, it would go on to feature in New Earth and Doomsday, and it even cropped up in Torchwood Children of Earth as a lift in Thames House. I mean, it's quite an achievement for such an ordinary shot to be elevated to such legendary status. Do you see what I did there? Do you see what I did there? Number 2. Recurring Rose. Prior to her grand return in Turn Left, Rose Tyler made 3 cameo appearances across Series 4. Well, technically 2, since one ended up being used twice. And in true timey-wimey fashion, the episode it came from was yet to air when it first appeared. Following her most substantial cameo in Partners in Crime, Rose briefly flashed up on the Tardis scanner in The Poison Sky, mouthing, "Doctor!" A similar shot of Rose then showed up on a Crusader 50 shuttle monitor in Midnight, similar because it was exactly the same. The footage was filmed in December 2007 during the production of Turn Left and was always intended to appear in Midnight, but its inclusion in The Poison Sky came much later in the day. That decision was only made after the broadcast of Partners in Crime, when the response to her first cameo had been extremely positive. That was April 2008, mere weeks before the Sontaran two-parter was due to go out. So although the broadcast order would have you believe otherwise, this is a Midnight shot reused in The Poison Sky, not the other way round. Number 1. I Spy. The power of the Doctor introduced us to the Guardians of the Edge in a thrilling sequence featuring cameos from 5 previous Doctors. This material was no mean feat to put together. It was shot across multiple days due to actor availability and required significant VFX work to morph the Guardians' faces into each other and to create the vistas of the Edge itself. Memorably, the sequence begins with a shot of the 13th Doctor's eye studying her new environment. War of the Sontarans opened in a very similar way, with an abstract dreamlike sequence followed by a close-up of the Doctor's eye as she regains consciousness. In the case of The Power of the Doctor, well, it seemed that this shot was only deemed necessary in the edit, as the one used is in fact an alternate take from War of the Sontarans. This was noticed by fans and confirmed on Twitter by Jamie Magnus Stone, who directed both episodes. The reuse was well disguised, with the shot flipped and coloured differently, but for eagle-eyed fans, Jodie Whittaker's hair, much wavier than usual due to the rain that plagued War of the Sontarans location work, is a dead giveaway. An example of footage reuse that is, quite literally, staring you in the face. And that's everything for this list, but for more cool production details, check out 10 unnecessary Doctor Who details you need to know. In the meantime, I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.